Why don't we just start with your family? So, where did you grow up? Where were you born?
I was born in Hamburg, and in the year in which Hitler came to power in 1933, and I grew up as a child under the Hitler regime.
Okay, and did you grow up in Hamburg, or?
No, actually, only I have only sketchy childhood memories from Hamburg. We moved to Lübeck, about 40 miles north of Hamburg, when I was maybe 5 years old or so, and Lübeck is a city closer to the Baltic Sea.
Okay. So tell me about your parents. What were they like?
My parents, my mother was from a family in Thuringia in central Germany. And my father was from the western part, from Dortmund. And they married in 1931, and a few years later they had their first son.
Well, you.
Yeah, me. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. So, what did your father do for work?
My father, by training, was a banker, and but during the Depression, he lost his job and started working for a cigarette company for a while, and then he actually became a businessman by himself.
Okay.
He opened up bookstores in Hamburg.
Okay.
In the city where I was originally born.
Okay.
And later on, he decided to join the insurance company, the Gotha Insurance Company, because he was forced out of his bookstores because at the time he was not allowed to actually have a bookstore because his mother was of Jewish descent, and there was a letter which I actually have. I have this letter declaring that my father was no longer eligible to distribute German culture, and he had to close his bookstore overnight and actually sell it out for a song.
Okay. So he went to go work for the Gotha Insurance Company. So
Yes. My mother, due to family ties, had some loose ties to the Gotha Insurance Company. The Gotha Insurance Company is actually the oldest German insurance company in existence today, and only Lloyd's of London is older. And an ancestor of mine, actually on my mother's side, is the founder of this company, and a very innovative man, contemporary with the founding fathers, and he was actually the first one who launched the principle of a mutual insurance company concept, whereby the insurance company was not a stock company, but rather owned by the insurance, by the insured. And when the company is doing well, the insured were distributed dividends, and this concept was very, very successful, and it exists today, and it is one of the largest German insurance companies today. And also this concept was picked up throughout the world. Also, all American insurance companies are based on his ideas.
Isn't it too bad we didn't have the patent for that?
Well, no, I don't think that would be nice.
Or the rights,
okay.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so what did your father do? Did he stay in the Gotha insurance company for the whole duration of the war?
I think for the rest of his life, he was affiliated with the insurance company. He was a district manager in the Hamburg and Lübeck area in this, and he was one of the directors of that company.
Okay, yes. Interesting. But he joined the army, correct?
Yes. During the war, it's kind of interesting because all professionals and businessmen, for one reason or the other, had to be certified as certified Aryans during that time frame. And for some reason, and it's very odd why, nobody knows why, insurance professionals were not required to produce impeccable Aryan credentials. For some reason, this was probably just forgotten. Like in any kind of dictatorship, the left hand often does not know what the right hand is doing.
Right. So he, but he joined the army.
Yes, he actually he felt a kind of pressure to because everybody was actually in the military, and I remember he was very conflicted about that, about joining the army. I remember a suicide attempt which he had made. He was in a hospital and he had taken an overdose of sleeping pills, but he was nurtured back to life, and there were several incidents like that. In his job, he could have claimed that he was essential to the functioning of the business, but he thought it was a better hiding place to be in the military rather than out in the open and everybody envious that he did not have to be in the army.
Right. So what did he do in the army? How did that happen?
Well, his basic training was carried out in Hamburg in a military camp there. On weekends he often came home. I actually have pictures of him visiting us. We were children, my brother and I. My brother was born in 1935, but he was attached to a unit that went into Poland or was sent into Poland, into occupied Poland, and he was a motorcycle messenger for the army, and he had to drive at high speed and bring messages from one unit to the other, and things. In those days, computers and wireless communication was not that advanced yet. So actually orders were carried on paper by motorcycle from one unit to the next. It was actually a dangerous job. Sometimes they have to sort of barrel through dangerous partisan infested areas, which were difficult to, He fell off his motorcycle once and broke his collarbone, and was under treatment for a while, and later on he was attached to a unit which ferried supplies to the front in back of the lines from certain supply centers directly to the front. So he was actually driving a truck for the military.
So he drove a truck, and so as I understand it, he was then transferred to Italy. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
He was on the Italian front.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and what happened there?
Well, he was driving his truck through the Apennine Mountains and in Italy, and usually these transports were carried out at night in order to avoid American fighter planes, which were everywhere, low-flying aircraft, which were able to knock out the supply lines by actually having easy targets with these trucks. So under the cover of darkness, they were driving through the mountains there. These mountains also had been the field of operation of partisan groups of the Italian resistance against the regime or against the Germans. So it was quite dangerous actually to drive through these areas, because sometimes they were booby-trapped. And at one time they had thrown metallic objects onto the road, which actually cut the tires, and these were called the iron orange peels. It looked like a peeled orange, only bent in all different directions, and the tires had tubes in those days, and obviously when the tube was punctured, you had a flat tire. So at one time he was forced in the middle of the night to actually fix his tires, and he was totally expecting that the partisans would come out of the woodworks and either capture him or otherwise kill him, but they never came. So he actually managed to fix the tires and keep going, and so yeah. Another time he had mines on the truck. Plate mines, which were they're called in German Teller mines.
So like a landmine?
Yeah, landmines. That's the word.
Oh, okay.
Actually, his truck was hit by a fighter plane, and the mines exploded, and he was thrown into the ditch. His body in the cabin was killed, and he had barely a scratch, and
wow.
he survived, but his whole truck was gone. There was a big hole in the road, from the explosion.
Yeah.
And they almost court-martialed him. And that would have been a disaster for him, because then they would have found out about his ancestry, perhaps. He was almost court-martialed because he had lost his rifle. The rifle is the bride of the soldier, and you cannot abandon your bride.
Even if you are in the middle of an exploding car.
That was I think finally reason went into their argument.
Well.
And so that was one incident where he was extremely lucky.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so he was eventually captured, correct, by the Americans? Right?
Yes, towards the end of the war. I don't know exactly when. By the end of 1944. Yes, 1944. He was captured in Italy by the Americans. They actually employed him to drive a truck for them. So that was the irony of the whole thing. He just then drove a truck for the Americans.
Well.
How he organized that, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. So, do you can you tell us a little bit about some stories about during that time when your father was out, in the army, what your life was like?
Well, we lived in Lübeck. And my mother, my brother, and I, we were the remnant family, and if you look at the map and the geography of northern Germany, Lübeck is situated right at the bottom of the Jutland Peninsula, which actually continues into Denmark in the north, and the bombing squadrons which every night flew into Germany to bomb cities or industry, infrastructure, or whatever they did, they used the coastline of the North Sea as their guide to fly into Germany. They came from Britain, from Great Britain, and flew along the Netherlands coast and the German coast at the North Sea, and then they crossed land at the base of the Jutland Peninsula. So Lübeck was continuously under air raid alert, because every night these bomber squadrons flew overhead, and there was an air raid alarm every night. Now these squadrons, when they hugged the coast of the North Sea and then the Baltic Sea, they're a little safer against the flak over water rather than over land. So they flew as long as they could over water, and then turned south to their envisioned target. They were given orders to they went towards Berlin or other cities, Hamburg or so, and suddenly these whole squadrons just turned south and bombed these areas. So air raids were so common that we almost ignored them because we knew that they flew overhead. Yes, we were told to go into the air raid shelter every time there's an air raid alert, but when there's a continuous air raid alert without ever stopping, your life goes on. You almost get used to the threat, and as it turned out, we were we were towards the later parts of the war. We were actually never bombed. Lübeck was once a target very early on in the raids against cities, and that was in March 1942. And the city was burning, and a lot of the old medieval buildings and churches were destroyed, and it was a horrible experience. We were in the air raid shelter and survived, and so that was probably the very first massive attack against a German city which ever took place, but it was never repeated thereafter. And there are several reasons about it, into which we can get later, perhaps.
Okay, or we could go into them now.
Well,
Like?
if you want
Sure.
to, to get closer towards the end of the war, there were several attempts by factions of the German military machine to actually find a way to connect with the Western Allies in one way or another, with the aim to actually have a separate armistice with the Western forces, and in an attempt to keep the Russians out of Central Europe, because they were approaching this. One of these attempts was John Foster Dulles, who was later on the American Secretary of State. He was a CIA operative in Bern, in Switzerland, and he had connections to all the Nazi bosses, and he played one against the other, but he was the conduit for many of those attempts by different factions in the German military machine. And another attempt of such to establish such connections with the West was actually headquartered in Lübeck, and actually, and in true fact, across the street from where we lived. And the leader of this group was Heinrich Himmler, the infamous leader of the SS, and so they tried to establish connections to the West by way of diplomatic channels of Sweden. In Lübeck was a Swedish consulate, and the consul general in Lübeck was Count Volker Bernadotte. Count Volker Bernadotte was later on assassinated by Muslim fanatists in Palestine. He was the High Commissioner of the United Nations in Palestine after the war. So he was an influential person, having the job of the Swedish consul in Lübeck. And Heinrich Himmler contacted Bernadotte, and they had several discussions about the possibility of Sweden trying to negotiate something with the Western Allies. Sweden, as you know, was a neutral country during the Second World War. And yes, and that obviously failed because Heinrich Himmler had really no credentials to be a reputable counterpart at the negotiating table with the Western Allies.
Right, right.
But one thing which Sweden demanded at the time was they demanded that 4,000 Jewish inmates of concentration camps be shipped to Sweden out of the camps in Germany, and they wanted to nurture them back to better health, after their the time of starvation in the concentration camps. And I don't know, we often hear Germans say we did not know anything about these atrocities which actually happened during the Hitler years at the hands of the SS. But I have witnessed certain things which I think I can never forget.
Yeah. Wow.
The 4,000 people were to be delivered to Sweden, and they were. There was a long foot march of people who were nothing but walking skeletons, and wearing rags and nothing else, and they were accompanied by the SS with their German shepherds, bloodhounds and whatever, and machine guns, and I saw how the SS told these walking skeletons to hurry up and hurry up and hurry up, and they could barely set one foot in front of the next, and as we heard later on, these people towards the end of the war were put onto a former luxury liner, the Cap Arcona, in the harbor of Lübeck. They were put on board of this former luxury liner. That luxury liner actually set sail for Sweden, but was torpedoed in the Bay of Lübeck, and the ship with all the thousands of thousands of unfortunates went down, and one could see the rump of the ship for years in the Bay of Lübeck. The captain perhaps tried to beach the ship or whatever. At least part of the ship was actually above the waterline, and very few people survived this absolute disaster. But what I want to say is, we knew.
Yeah. So do you know who had actually torpedoed that ship?
Well, I don't know. I can only say what I heard, and it made the most sense to me at the time that a Russian submarine actually was in waiting. And
okay.
Yeah.
So did the Russians know about this negotiation that was going on, or were they working with the Nazis? What?
I think they would not know, because this was something which the Nazi regime actually was trying to establish with the Western forces against the Russians. And but according to the Treaty of Yalta, it was decided by the Allies, and this included the Russians and Stalin's Soviet Union, that nothing but the unconditional surrender of Germany will be accepted. There is nothing to be negotiated about terms or armistice terms or whatever.
Okay, all right. So you brought up that Heinrich Himmler and the headquarters of the SS was located across the street from where you lived.
Yeah.
In Lübeck. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What that was like? And
well, there was a lot of traffic there, and a lot of people which we had never seen. This military camp was used before to retrain soldiers which have been nurtured back to health after they were injured in the war, and this was actually a benign camp without any real importance as a target or so. It was never bombed or anything, and. But then it became Heinrich Himmler's headquarters, and the SS moved in with all its staff and officers and secretaries and whatever was there. All these people who worked the machine, and we had. Two of the secretaries actually living in a room in our apartment. My mother was requisitioned to actually supply housing for people. So people had to sort of squeeze together in one way or the other. Now, with these secretaries, and they were quite pretty ladies, that was an attraction for SS officers to actually have parties, and it was almost daily that they came visiting with either a bottle of French champagne or the Russian caviar, and they had incredible delicacies at their disposal, which we had not seen in 5-6 years of wartime, that anything like this actually existed. So they opened these bottles freely, and and food and hors d'oeuvres and everything what they had, and of course they were trying to serenade these secretaries, and my mother was always sitting with them and making sure that things don't get out of hand right in our living room, and so that was quite dangerous.
Yeah, especially with two children in the house.
Yes, and but something akin to what I saw later on in the movie of Schindler's List, where the SS had parties at all times, and it was these parties were so irrational that they did not actually accept the reality, or that Germany was actually losing the war. The Americans had crossed the Rhine River, and the Russians were at the gates of Berlin, and Germany was getting smaller, and we had a map of Europe on the wall at the time, and whenever certain cities or towns were mentioned in the news or in the propaganda also. My mother put a little pin there. All the Russians are now in Silesia. Is that possible that they are there in Silesia or in Königsberg and in other cities? This was something totally scary. And then when you looked at the whole map of Europe, that little bit of Germany in the center there, we often said that, this small Germany and against the world, the whole world is closing in onto it. Now, this is a lost cause. This is nothing to fight for anymore. You try to salvage what you can, not try to fight to the last bullet. And my mother at one time made such a remark while the SS was sitting there around the table. We had a round table in the middle of the living room, and they were all drunk, and my mother thought it was safe that these guys were no longer totally in command of themselves, but suddenly they became sober and stood up and suddenly told her, "Do you think that our Führer is such a swine? That he let that happen." At the time there was always this propaganda about of the miraculous weapons like the V2 and the V1, rockets which were launched to destroy England or to attack Great Britain, and then FDR died. Oh my God, this is the miracle, and things. That's what people were saying. Now America is out of the war, and of course, all these were irrational illusions, but these were these kinds of straws which these people were holding on to, and justify their irrational parties, which were going on every day, and until the British were at the gates of Lübeck and actually took Lübeck. And the first time I saw a motorcycle messenger of the British Royal Army going by our house, and he drove on the left-hand side of the road. That scared me more than anything. that guy, at an incredible speed, on the left-hand side of the road. The British had the same kind of communication system that my father was a part of at one time. So, yeah.
So, what was it like to go to school? What was it like in school?
Yes, we all had to, at age 10, every German boy had to join the Hitler Youth. And we were just called the young people or something, or the Jungvolk, that's what we were called. We were not really, we had not graduated to become Hitler's youth. Mm-hmm. We were just in training to become Hitler's youth. But every week there was a meeting of a small group of brown shirts. We all had uniforms, brown shirts, and led by somebody who was maybe 2 years older than we were, and kids, we did not know much about what was actually going on behind the scenes, or so. We were just indoctrinated as future soldiers, and sometimes the weather was such that we had to stay indoors, and then we exchange jokes, and then all the jokes that I remember were critical of the Nazi regime, and the political jokes were. I barely remember any of them, but all of a sudden we were forbidden to actually tell jokes. Because they spread the undercurrent of discontent, and as long as we make jokes about political leaders and then that is a sure sign that we actually fear them, and that they are actually not just our leaders, but our oppressors.